All right, everyone, this is going to be a lesson on energy flow in the sustainability unit. I'll be taking over the section that references page 28 to 32 in the textbook of Investigating Science 9. And at the end of this video, I'd like us to try page 35, numbers 3, 7, 9, 10, and 11 as part of homework to help understand. Now, this video is going to assume that you've done the previous video. So you've talked about the cycling of matter. So we can talk about, the next portion, which is energy flow. For your benefit, I have provided a summary note that has all the different definitions that you might need prior to this lesson. I am going to go fast with the definitions because they're all stuff that you might have learned in grade school, anywhere between grades 1 to 8. You might have seen it before. So there's some background knowledge I'm just going to review, but it is in your best interest to pause the video now. Take a look at the summary notes provided with the link in the same place you found this video and print it out for yourself. The goal of this video isn't for you to copy down and write definitions so you can memorize them and turn into a robot. Keep the definitions provided and instead listen to this video, picking up some of the larger, broader, and more important ideas behind energy flow and keep that for yourself. And if you have the notes and you hear something that you think is important, you might want to add it to your notes and keep it for a future reference. All right, let's get started. So previously, in the previous lessons, you've learned about the cycling of matter. In other words, atoms and molecules are used and reused over and over again in this world. So for example, the atoms that make up, let's say, your arm, let's say a carbon atom inside your arm came from, I don't know, a dinosaur that used to live millions and millions of years ago. Well, think about it, right? Millions and millions of years ago, there used to be a dinosaur and it died. The carbon that makes up this dinosaur was recycled somewhere, recycled somewhere, recycled somewhere, recycled somewhere until it ended up in your body when you were born. It's a possibility. There is a good chance that that is true. Anyways, everything in this world, so let's moving on, removing everything, I can't spell. Let's move on to the lesson. Everything in this world can actually be broken down into two broad categories. The first one is what you learned last time, which is matter. That is anything that has mass or takes up space. But you might think, well, anything that takes up space, that's basically everything in this world. What could possibly be the second category? Well, I'll tell you what that is. That is energy. Think about it. Does energy have mass? Does it take up space? We're not in a cartoon where we have like a ball of energy and you can hold that in the palm of your hand, right? You can't hold energy and you can't pass it to someone like it was a ball. It doesn't make any sense, right? You can't do that. So let's move on. Vaguely, you might have heard when you were younger, someone say, oh my goodness, you have so much energy. Or maybe one of your friends right now is like, oh, I'm so low in energy. That implies that you can gain or lose energy. So how do you gain energy? Pause the video think about it. Pause the video and think about it. Did you think about it? I'm hoping when you ask yourself that question, the answer you got was eating. We can gain energy by eating. So if we want to talk about energy flow, we first have to talk about eating. And if you want to talk about eating in nature, we have to hammer out some ecology terms or definitions regarding the food chain. And that is what you will see in your summary notes, okay? So I'm gonna go really, really fast. Keep up with me by looking at the summary notes. I'm going to start with a very simple food chain of grass, which is going to be eaten by, how about a rabbit? I can't spell again. Which is going to be eaten by a coyote. Evil, okay? Coyote. All right, let's start classifying. First off, I'd like you to notice that the direction of the arrows are always pointing towards what is eaten by what. So the grass is eaten by rabbit, which is eaten by coyote, not the other way around. If you draw it this way, it is incorrect. Please be careful, all right? let's continue. The grass here is the only organism that doesn't have an arrow pointing towards it. So where does it get its energy? It gets its energy from the sun. Okay, the source of all energy is what they call it. We can describe the grass, the rabbit, the coyote, anything in a food chain based on how many positions away it is from the sun or the location you find it in the food chain. So we are going to use the word trophic level as a feeder level. Okay, so trophic level is a feeder level, aka what position they hold in the food chain. So grass here would be the first trophic level. The rabbit would then be the second trophic level. And the coyote here would be the third trophic level. If it so happens that something was eating the coyote, we would call it the fourth for sure. Okay? By trophic level, again, it's the first organism in the food chain, so it's the first trophic level. Another way you could say it is how many steps away from the sun. It is 1 step away from the sun. That's why it's the first trophic level, second trophic level. Okay? That is one way we can classify food chains based on trophic level. The second way we can classify organisms is how they get their food. So let's change the color a little bit. Grass produces their own food through the sun using photosynthesis. And there are some other plants that use other non-living energy sources, but let's keep it simple. The grass here is what we call a producer because it produces its own food. Another way we can call it a producer is an autotroph, automatic, right? Autotroph. The rabbit and the coyote do not produce their own food. They heavily rely on eating. So this rabbit is a consumer. And of course, the coyote is also a consumer. A consumer can be also called a heterotroph. And so a coyote is also a heterotroph. Okay, there it is. There's 2 different ways we can classify food chains. Can you handle a bit more? I hope so. Obviously, food chains can get really complex, and there are many, many different types of consumers that you might see. And also, a rabbit that consumes and a coyote that consumes, they're sort of different, right? Rabbits are herbivores, coyotes are carnivores, and we also have omnivores somewhere in the mix. And so another way we can categorize consumers is give them numbers. The rabbit is the primary, so 1 degree, primary consumer because it heavily relies on producers. It is the first consumer. Coyotes are, in this food chain, secondary consumers. And of course, if something ate the coyote, we would call it a tertiary consumer. Okay, so you can see primary consumers are herbivores. Secondary consumers are going to be carnivores. And of course, as I mentioned before, there are omnivores. All right, so we're going to move on. The food chain in itself is pretty simple, but it can get a bit more complex. And for me to make my point, I'm going to move to another slide. Okay, and go back to black. All right. Okay, for the sake of making a point, let's start drawing in a more elaborate way. Here's my grass, right? Autotroph, producer, yeah. The second and afterwards, the grass is eaten by the rabbit, which is, a primary consumer and heterotroph, so on and so forth. Second trophic level, so on and so forth. And that is going to be eaten by, as I said before, a coyote. Okay, and that would be, so third trophic level, secondary consumer, a heterotroph, so on and so forth. All of these, all living organisms, generally speaking, have to go to the washroom. So there's going to be waste. Okay, how about I draw it like this? There's going to be waste. And all living organisms also cannot escape the inevitable end of death. They're just passing away. So there's going to be a lot of poop and dead remains all over the place. But do you see mounds of carcasses out there in the world? No. Where do they go? Well, essentially speaking, they will go to things that eat dead remains. That is, detritivores. Why do we give it such an interesting name? It is because waste, the proper word for waste in ecology is detritus. Okay, D-E-T-R-I-T-U-S. And detritus is going to be eaten by detritivores. Okay, things like maggots that will turn into flies after, things like earthworms. Okay, and they're super happy because they get lots of food everywhere they look. Okay, they're detritivores. Another type of organism that might make use of organic matter, like for example, detritivores will eat all the muscles and tissues and whatnot, leaving the bones lying on the ground. What happens to the bones? Do we see mounds of bones everywhere? No. These things can also be eaten by these things called decomposers. Now, don't get it twisted. Decomposers don't actually eat bones. What they do is they secrete a kind of enzyme that will break down or decompose the dead remains and releasing the nutrients into the environment. And the decomposers will eat the nutrients. But of course, they can't eat all of it. Some of them do escape into the soil, which end up helping the grass. And so it completes the circle of life. Lion King. Okay, copyright, whatever. Okay, and that is ecology, and that is the food chain. Now, of course, I've sort of overly simplified what a food chain is. There are a gazillion types of food chains out there in the world. Here is a slightly more complicated version of a food chain. Take a look. Here is a food chain. We have multiple food chains all linked together, and so we give it a new name, and that is called a food web. Okay, so let's try to identify some of these food chains. I got one here. How about starting from my primary, so my first trophic level, corn. It is going to be eaten by grasshoppers, which are eaten by frogs, which are going to be eaten by, sure, okay, let's do this properly. Corn, grasshopper, frog, python, eagle. That is one food chain, right? Another food chain in the same area is how about mangoes that are eaten by fruit flies, which are going to be eaten by the frog, which are then going to be eaten by the python. Oh, it's getting messy. Mangoes, fruit flies, dragonfly, frog, and then let's say eagle. Just following the arrows here. Oof. So the overlap is the frog. When we write this in a linear fashion from left to right, you will see that the frog is going to overlap. So if we have corn, let's do this in blue. If we have corn, grasshopper, to a frog, to a python, to an eagle, and then I put it side by side with a mango that's eaten by a fruit fly, which is eaten by a dragonfly, that is going to be eaten by the frog, which is going to be eaten by, directly by the eagle. You see how things can get a little bit complicated? Okay, so fry, how about I just do eagle like that, just for the sake of clarity, right? I'd like you to try this as an exercise. You don't need to copy what I have done, but just to get you into the, I guess, into the groove of using some of the terms that we covered, I'd like you to do a couple of things for me right now by pausing the video. Number one, please identify two food chains, okay, with one or more organisms overlapping. Okay, so you're going to have at least one organism that connects two food chains together. Okay, write out these two food chains linearly, just the way I did, while the overlapping organism is not written twice. You just sort of draw the arrows, connect them. Label every organism as a producer or a consumer. Okay, so you're gonna have to practice that. Label the trophic levels of every organism. And label each consumer as primary, secondary, or tertiary consumers, okay, etc. Pause the video now and give it a shot. And once you are done that, you have reached your first checkpoint. You might want to pause the video and give yourself a chance to stretch and grab some water and come back. Okay? Checkpoint 1 complete. I am going to now assume you've had a quick break and move on to the next one. Be aware, the last couple minutes, last maybe 5-10 minutes of this lesson, this food chain that we've been working on is very, very simplified. If I wanted to be a little bit more realistic to exactly what a real food chain might look like, it would look a little bit more like that, right? You see how many different animals are connected, how many different top predators are actually present. There's like 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's nothing else in this food chain that eats these green circled predators. They are the top predators. And all these plants and, you know, herbivores, whatnot, it's so intertwined. It's really, really important, okay? And this brings us to the idea of how a food chain, a food web, shows the intricate importance of biodiversity. We make a big stink about it in news and stuff, about why it's so bad that an animal goes extinct. So what's the big deal? Okay, let's take a quick look. Whenever you look at a food web or animals in general, I like you to see how important their role is, okay? It's not just a food chain that's this simple. It's so interconnected. And consider this. This is why biodiversity is so important. What if, let's say, we didn't like fruit flies because they were annoying and we took them out of the equation? We don't want to see them anymore. So what happens? Well, mangoes would be happy because they don't have anything that's hurting them. But thrushes, dragonflies, frogs, all of them lose a source of food. What's worse, if dragonflies are gone, thrushes get 1 slash because of the fruit flies, but they also get a 2nd slash because the dragonflies are suffering. And if they get 2 slashes, the wolf gets less food as a source. And if that's the case, the eagle, who don't have wolves to eat, who don't have thrushes to eat, who don't have as many frogs to eat, they're going to end up suffering. It's a lot more intricate than you might imagine. How intricate? Well, let me allow Bill Nye to take over and give you a bit of an idea of how biodiversity is more important than you might think. Take a look at this quick 1-minute clip.
We can think of an ecosystem as this wooden puzzle game. See all the different species? They all fit together, and they depend on each other to live. Now, you know, once in a while, a species will go extinct. It'll disappear from the ecosystem. And you can see how you could lose a few of those without too much trouble. But you start to lose too many, the whole thing becomes a little rickety. Now, where do people fit? Well, look, they fit in just about everywhere. Look, just about anywhere you can walk, you'll find people living, because people are living things and they're part of the ecosystem. So when we go to manage an ecosystem, we have to be careful about how things fit together, or there won't be a place for us. We have to be very careful, extremely careful. Now, this hasn't happened yet, but it could.
Okay, that's very quick. Yeah, it's a quick plug into why biodiversity is so important. Now that we have a certain foundation of what food chains and food webs are, it's a quick review, quick, quote unquote. I can then talk about this idea of energy flow. Okay, all right. Clearing the page. According to the laws of thermodynamics, so you might want to take a look at your summary sheet now. According to the laws of thermodynamics, the first law states that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed and transferred from a location to another. Okay. The second law states that when transformed, okay, some energy is lost. That's the simplest way I can describe it. Whenever we transform energy, we don't get 100% efficiency in doing that. Okay, here's a quick explanation. Let's pretend that you ate a sandwich, okay, a sweet sandwich. There's your bread. I don't know why it's colored blue. There's your condiments and whatever, and then here your other piece of bread. Okay, who doesn't like a sandwich? Well, maybe you don't. I don't know. Just an example. Deal with it. When you eat something, your body actually doesn't get a chance to digest everything and add it to your body. Why? Well, I don't even have to explain. Every single one of us ends up having to go to the bathroom. Don't we? Yes? Okay. That means everything that comes out of us when we go to the bathroom is essentially waste, right? On average, we get about 60% of our food going into the waste. Okay, so we lose 60% of the energy we could have gained, all right? Another 30% of energy leaves us or is used up in the form of things like body heat, body activities like heart pumping, breathing, thinking with your brain, etc. Okay, so what does that leave us? Inside our body, like physically, inside our body, about 10% of energy remains. And so let's say Jurassic Park, dinosaurs come back to life, and they're like, that looks good to eat, and eats us as part of the food chain. And it's happy. Okay? How much energy does this dinosaur gain from us, from this sandwich specifically? If this sandwich had 100 units of energy, this dinosaur only gained 10% or 10 units of energy. So if this dinosaur wants to stay alive, it's going to have to eat a lot of humans to get the same amount of energy we get from that sandwich. Okay? Did you catch that? As we move along and we get eaten, so in other words, in the food chain, only about 10% pass on. All right? Let's make it a little more complex. We have grass, okay? We have a grasshopper, okay? We have a frog that eats the grasshopper, okay? We have a snake that eats the frog. And then we have a hawk that will eat the snake. Okay? Because of the limitations of energy flow, as we move up in trophic levels, the population of each level will have to drastically decrease. Do we see the same number of grass as we do hawks in this world? No. Okay? We can't. It is because there's not enough energy to go around. Due to the limitation of energy flow, the populations of each trophic level is better illustrated as a kind of a pyramid of numbers. And I believe I have a picture of that in our summary notes. Okay, so if this was, let's say, 100 units of energy, the grasshoppers will get essentially about 10%. The frogs will get 10% of that, which is 1. The snakes would end up getting 10% of that, and the hawks end up getting even less. Right? So for the hawk to get enough energy, it's going to have to eat a lot of these and often to survive, right? Plus, 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 plus. Now the notes that I gave you, it states how the pyramid is what? If I have 10,000 units of energy of one, then the next level would be 10,000 of another. The next level would be 100 units. The next level would be 10 units, 1 unit, 0.1 units, so on and so forth. But even that is actually a little misleading. If we were to truly draw a picture based on energy, if this is 10,000, 1,000 would be only 10% of that. This would be 1,000. 100 units of energy is that, which is 100. And then 10, and then 1. Okay, that is a better depiction of how much energy actually moves from one trophic level to the next. If we were to talk, so this would be an energy pyramid, a better energy pyramid. If we wanted to talk about a population pyramid, it looks even more pyramid. It looks even more ridiculous, right? So my previous example of grass to grasshopper to frog to snake to hawk, it would be grass, lots and lots of it, millions of grass, okay? Which gives us to a decent number of grasshoppers. But from there, as we go up, the number of frogs drastically decreases. Frogs, snakes, and maybe like 1 hawk up there. Okay, population pyramid, energy pyramid, they don't have to look the same. It's not always the same. In fact, sometimes you could have more insects than the number of plants because one plant can house a gazillion insects, right? So it could be, let's say, dandelions, right? If this is the amount of dandelions, the number of, butterflies or bees or whatnot that can be hosted by one dandelion is a lot more, right? So this could be a plant, this could be insects, and then the number of frogs that can host that is, so again, smaller. Okay, so that could be another population pyramid. Anyways, the main point of this video would be energy flow and just the unfortunate fact that as we move up trophic levels, the amount of energy transferred becomes significantly less, approximately 10% transferred only. Okay, quick reminder, with that idea, if you like more reading, again, the reference is page 28 to 32. We'd like you to try in page 35, numbers 3, 7, and then 9 to 11. All right, thanks for watching. See you in the next one.